Right, I think we got critical mass actually. This is, feels good for a nice sized group.
Agreed. Yeah. Well, thanks very much to everybody who is here. A warm welcome to all of you. I saw Allison also jumped on from Pacific Beach Rotaract and the Peace Chair there. Welcome very much. Um, I'm sure we'll have more folks pop in, and hopefully we'll be able to let them in with ease while staying focused on the presentation. I'm Bradley Day. For those who might not know me, I am the District Rotaract representative for our district, District 5340. And this is our regular district council meeting that we have with representatives. For anybody who doesn't know, then of course we have our individual clubs and we have our leadership within our clubs, but we also have a district council who helps as a leadership and guidance for everybody across the whole entire district. We try to do our best to help people stay connected with one another and to be a voice and advocate for Rotaract in the Rotary world, and to help connect Rotarians with Rotaractors to help create Rotaract clubs, etc. It's a pleasure to have each one of you here. Today's a very special one. We're inviting members from all the clubs, and we hope that you'll be able to enjoy the presentation that we have prepared for today. By way of introduction then, for our main presentation, we will have James Stewart as our main speaker. Hi, James. James is a member of our very own District 5340. He's a Rotarian from Rancho Bernardo Sunrise Club. James became interested in peace, which is the focus of the presentation that we'll be doing today. And he became interested in peace. He's the peace chair for his club, and he went to the peace conference for Rotary that was held earlier this year in January over in Ontario, California. And he also became very interested in peace through the Institute for Economics and Peace, which is where he's received some instruction and training, which has led to the culmination for this presentation that he'll be sharing with us today. So we're very grateful. I'm very grateful that James is choosing to share this knowledge on peace with us, especially when we need it and when we're looking for a way to do good in the world, when we're living in an online format, the way that we can still have peace and to have a message of peace for ourselves. And this is one of James' first presentations regarding the Institute for Economics and Peace. And we're very grateful that he's also giving us the honor of that first presentation, and that he chose to reach out to the Rotaract clubs for it. Jim, without further ado, thank you so much for being here, and the time is all yours.
Okay, well, I'm just going to jump in and share a screen. And then share a presentation. Okay, so I like to begin this presentation with a dark screen. And that is, I think it's symbolic of, if you think about 6-some odd billion people across the planet Earth, I think we're all pretty much in the dark when it comes to what's going on in the world of peace. Okay. And by inclusion, I think that if you look across the United States, people know they know what peace is. They know peace when they see it. They know how to spell it. But when it comes to peace studies and the fact that you can build peace, I don't think they know all that much about it. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is share some of the material I've learned about peace, the status of peace in the world, peace studies and peace building. And the main message that you'll hear today is peace can be created, and peace impacts are game-changing and life-saving. Okay, so when we get to the end of the presentation, I'm going to give a little poll, and the test is, did we create a case that says, yeah, I believe this? Okay. Let me come at it a little bit of a different way. And for the vast majority of people, you know, when they think about war and peace, you know, the opposite of war is the absence of violence. You know, we clearly know that the left side picture is not near as peaceful as the right side, and we either take a walk in the park and land in a drop zone. This is a true view of what peace is and a way to describe it, but it's an incomplete view as well. And for a lot of Rotarians and baby boomers, grew up in Vietnam War era and later, you know, peace protests, people putting flowers down the barrels of the guards at campuses, gurus, flower children, peace marches. Those are one thing that they think about when they think about peace. And that's true for them, but it's also an incomplete view of the peace world. A lot of people also think about peace as something that people in positions of power do. They high and mighty communications and negotiations across long tables, trying to impact nasty places in the world and change things for the better. And this is also an aspect of peace, but it's an incomplete peace. So today, what I really want to talk to you about is a more complete picture of peace and peace studies, the status of peace in the world and peace building. If you're not familiar with the topic, I'm really interested in changing your worldview and changing it in an exciting and wonderful way. When I first started getting involved with this, I didn't know this material existed, and it's been really exciting to learn about it. Introduced earlier, my name is James Stewart. I'm from Rancho Bernardo Sunrise Rotary Club. I'm the Peace Chair. I've been a president one time in the past and a treasurer for our club. Done quite a few roles. We also have Jay Riordan here, who's the club service chairperson for Rancho Bernardo Sunrise Rotary, and Michael Barden wasn't introduced, who's a district peace chair and leads the Pathways to Peace project. Chuck and Bradley are also here. They're connected directly with the Rotaract community, and I hope you're familiar with them already. I stole this image. I really love this image. This comes directly off the Rotary.org website if you look under the topic of peace. And I really love the young lady who's writing on the wall. And so I've actually stolen that and used this for the title of my presentation, which is the opposite of war is creation of peace. Michael and I talked about this, and this is not a pure definition, but I decided to keep it anyway because I think this is a cool picture and I love the saying. If we go through this material, what I want to do is share you three major topics. One is the concept of negative peace. And this is what we talked about in the first colored slide, which is, war and the absence of violence. And, what people don't really understand is negative peace. It's been precisely defined. I mean, there's think tanks out there that have gone out there and put together measurement systems, and they've been measuring and reporting on the status of peace across the planet for a dozen years. And I'm going to share some of that material, and for some of you, it's going to be brand new, I'm betting. Additionally, there's a flip side to the negative peace, and that's this thing called positive peace. And that's building. And it's also been precisely defined, and it's been measured and reported for a dozen years as well. Okay. And I hope that by the end of this presentation, you can believe with me that peace can be created. You can actually look at a problem that exists in the world from a peace perspective, and you can go in there and design activities to influence it and to improve society to actually make the world a more peaceful place. And the impacts that are made with these peace projects are game changing. They change lives and they save lives. And so I think that's actually pretty cool. And in my year-long discovery, what I've found is that it's not a kumbaya space, which is where my head was at a long time ago. There's more that can be done, and it can be precise, and it can be put in place, and it can be measured. And so I think it's new information. One part of the backdrop to this is there are a lot of peace organizations. I mean, you go out and say peace organizations and type it into Google, and you're going to get dozens and dozens and hundreds of hits back. There's a lot of them out there. This is a relationship map for my journey in this, and I'm a Rotarian. First thing I did was go to the Peace Conference. Bradley, you mentioned this. And then over the course of the past year, I've basically gone in a counterclockwise direction and studied each of these groups and what they're doing on peace. And the ones that are a solid dark color, they're ones that I could talk about reasonably sanely, but there are so many others in the light colors that I haven't had time to go off and discover. And this is just one part of it. Let me go up here and talk about the Rotary Peace Conference for a moment. So this was in January in Ontario, California. And I had just been asked to be a peace chair. So I said, well, this is a fitting way to go learn about it. What the heck's going on in this world? And Rotary conventions have this really interesting thing they call the House of Friendship. And it's basically a trade show. And in the Ontario Convention Center, this is a list of the organizations that participated. So you got 50, 60 organizations that came to participate in a Rotary Peace Conference. And, they all have their special interests. They're all doing really good work, and trying to learn about them and organize them and understand what they're doing isn't really that easy. But what I wanted to do is share with you tonight more about this one, Institute for Economics of Peace. So let's spend some time on that. If you want to learn more about it on your own, economicsandpeace.org. It was founded by a Rotarian from Australia, Steve Kililea, in 2007. And what he wants to do and what IEP wants to do is they want to change the way people think about peace. That it's less of a act that somebody else does, it's less random, it's less about the minimizing violence, and it's more about creating peace and peace building. And this organization has a tremendous footprint, 20 billion media impressions every year across 150 countries. So their material is used a lot by a lot of people. And there's a lot of things they do. This is what their primary output is, as far as I can tell right now, and they do a lot of reports. So the top row is the reports they publish during this calendar year. They typically come out in the spring. And the next row is what they did in 2019. So they're doing half a dozen reports a year. These things are really thorough. They're printed in, I think, 8-point font, and there's 100 pages on them. They're full of pictures and diagrams, and we'll get to look at some of those. But this is a full-time quarter to try and read all 6 of these things and understand what they're trying to say. So if you need something infinitely long to do, go to economicsandpeace.org. We're going to spend time tonight on this thing called the Global Peace Index, okay, and some of the material that's in it. I mentioned it earlier in one of my intro slides that there's 2 sides to peace. There's a negative side of peace, which is talking about violence and fear of violence and trying to make that go away. And then there's the positive side of peace. There's a whole second half of the publication is what do you talk about positive? What do you mean positive peace? So we're going to start by talking about the Global Peace Index and how they measure and use negative peace discussions. And then we'll flip over to the positive peace. I'll stop and ask for questions in the between these two. And then when we're done with those 2 parts, we'll spend a little short time talking about, so what does that mean from a Rotary perspective? So if you go to the book, the Global Peace Index 2020 report, you're going to see this map in the publication. And so the way you read this is that this is the state of peace for 163 countries across the world. Okay, red is very low levels of peace. Dark green is very high levels of peace. And you can see the scale at the top, high, medium, low, very low. That's the scale they use. In this report, USA comes out coded yellow and has a medium level of peace. And so when I looked at this, I said, well, how do they get these colors? Where do they come from? I mean, what's the methodology they use to assign this? I mean, it's interesting. I like the information. It makes sense to me. Iceland's the most peaceful, very high state of peace country in the world, and Afghanistan's the lowest. So that, passes a sanity check. But I don't understand some of the rest of it. So if you get into it a little bit further, you're going to find that they have a numerical process for doing all this. And here's the list of countries that are in the map. Start out from Iceland on the top left side is number 1, all the way down to Afghanistan, number 163. And surprising and disappointing to me was the United States is 121. We're at the bottom of the yellow. We're in the company of Honduras and South Africa, which are not exactly renowned as peaceful places in the world. They have major problems. And so by association, it's like, whoa, we got some problems too. Maybe there's some work to be done here. So behind the color is the number. And behind the number, say, well, how did you get the number? These were 2.21 or whatever. And what they use is they got a 23 indicators that are mapped into 3 categories: militarization, safety, and then safety and security, and then conflict. And they have teams of people every year that go out and talk to 163 countries and get numerical measures for all of these factors. Okay, so here, I'm going to go through the list pretty quickly. I won't stop on them all, but the number of deaths from people in the country for external conflicts, from internal conflicts. Go to the next part. What's your relationship with your neighboring countries? How much political instability do you have? Number of refugees and displaced individuals, number of homicides, the level of violent crime, number of people in jail, number of armed services people, how weapons sales, imports and exports, nuclear and heavy weapons, access to small arms. So 23 factors that are all measured and reported on. You can go into the detail behind here. You can see plenty of stuff that would suffer for long hours working with Excel analysis. And it's like, okay, so these guys have a methodology. It's pretty clear what the methodology is. They spend a lot of time on it. And boy, so I look at the graph now and I'm going, I feel bad for the United States. They're in bad neighborhood. I don't like what's happening there. And so, I wonder what there's to do about that. If you look at the history of the USA index, okay, so the blue graph is the number on the bottom. So I took 163 divided minus 141 and I got 42. And so this is the distance from the bottom. This is its performance over the last period of time. But even since they've been measuring, the United States hasn't barely gone above the bottom 50, right? Most recently, we're down in the 38 or something like that. And then just this last year, they took an upturn for a couple things. The number of deaths from the external conflicts is way down with the getting a handle on things in the Middle East, in Iraq and Afghanistan. Homicide rates down, impact of terrorism's down. At the same time, the United States is becoming a very large import-export for military arms, and they have spent a lot of money. This is President Trump say we rebuilt the military, which has a negative impact on this, on the Global Peace Index. So that's the end of the first section. Negative peace is talking about the amount of violence that's in the world. Here's a map of it from color perspective, and you saw the numerics that are used to calculate it. Are there any questions or comments about it at this point in time? I'll take a pause before we move into the positive peace group. I don't see anybody raising their hands. Oh, Bradley.
I don't know if this is an appropriate question for the metrics, or maybe just a thought or unpopular opinion, but do you believe that in including into these metrics, we should consider the diversity and or democratic opportunity that countries have? So say, for example, a place might have a low amount of peace, but they also don't have much discussion and diversity in the kinds of ideologies that can be shared, and that could also influence the amount of peace that a country has.
I think you're a good straight man, because what you've done is move from the observation of violence or lack of peace and into the positive peace world. So if there aren't any other questions, we'll just head straight into that, because that's what's next. Let's just do it anyway. We can come back and ask more questions. Okay, so this material actually came out of the Positive Peace Report in 2019, as well as some of the stuff that's in the Global Peace Index report in 2020. And this is a partial answer to your question, Bradley, and the basis for positive peace. The people in the Institute for Economics and Peace are a think tank. As far as I can tell, they got really brilliant people. They've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to put this together. And so they said, we believe that the model we want to use to describe how to influence peace in a positive direction has the following 8 factors: low levels of corruption, acceptance of the rights of others, free flow of information, strong business environment, high levels of human capital, equitable distribution of resources, good relationships with neighbors, and well-functioning government. Okay, so Bradley, I'm assuming that you're starting to see how why I wanted to segue to this, because this is really talking about some of the factors that you were describing. Like, is there any, consideration for situation? Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so I said, we've described this. Not only have they described it, but they'll get into the sub detail in a couple of slides. But what I want to do is stop here and talk about some of the conclusions that the IEP has come up with on why do they even want to talk about positive peace? Because in the studies and the measurements they've done, they said if you have a high level of performance on these 8 pillars, you have stronger resilience in your country, resilience to stochastic shocks like COVID or a storm or an economic issue. You have better environmental outcomes. You have higher measures of well-being for the people that live in your country. You have better performance on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And for countries that have high levels of positive peace, they have a higher per capita income. They have better financial performance than ones that are at lower positive peace. So working on positive peace is a good thing. Okay, if you follow their model and you believe it to be true. So let me give a couple of examples of this, and I call this one about stronger resilience, that this is a game-changing kind of observation. So let's start on the right, and this is a map of frequency of natural disasters for a 10-year period, and it's split across the different countries and their status from positive peace. So the real thing you need to take away from this particular graph is that there's not much difference between a peaceful country and a non-peaceful country when it comes to natural disasters. They happen everywhere. So a storm goes through Africa and then goes up into Europe, and you're going through peaceful places and not peaceful places, and that doesn't change the frequency very much. But if you look at the graph on the left, what you see is the deaths that occur from those natural disasters. And what you're seeing is that if you've got a low state of peace, a lot of people die in your country. You have a drought and you can't respond to it, people starve, right? You have a flood and you can't get emergency vehicles, or you don't have any emergency vehicles, then people, get washed out to sea. But in peaceful countries, countries that have built the capability to have high functioning governments and all the other things we talked about, that people don't die there as often. So if you can work on a country and increase their positive peace and improve their pillars, you can save lives. Okay. You can make it easier for them to deal with life. Let's go to another example. So I just jumped to number 5, higher per capita income, and this is basically 2 financial impacts. The graph on the left is GDP over time. The gray line is the average of the world. GDP has been growing, from normalized to 100 in 2010. It's now grown to 132 as of this report, 2018. But for countries that have high levels of positive peace and they're improving it, they have substantially higher GDP growth. They're financially more effective. They have more money. Okay. On another financial effect, inflation. Countries that struggle with peace have huge variations in their inflation rates. Imagine what happens when they have the drought and there's not enough grain to go around, and the warlords have control of it. And so you end up with huge fluctuations in costs of things. Whereas countries that are more in control, so to speak, the variability of inflation is a lot lower and a lot more manageable. So those are 2 kind of reasons that pursuing a positive peace model makes sense when you stand back and look at the forest from the trees. Positive peace also has a map with a bunch of colors, and you can see that the lowest numbers are, basically what you could call third world countries across Africa, South America, and Middle East, Southern Asia. They're the ones that don't have as mature of positive peace systems. USA scores very high in this case, right? It's number 26 out of 163 countries. So we've got a good capability and we've got good structures. And so that's fantastic. We position here a lot better than we do on the actual peace performance that we saw in the previous graph. I told you I'd segue into describing it. So this is the equivalent of that list of topics for negative peace. This is just displayed a little bit different way. What are the things that go into this? So there's 24 factors that I've been able to find that go into, for instance, sound business environment. They have measures around business environment, GDP per capita, and prosperity. Flip to the other side, good relationships with neighbors. They have metrics developed around hostility to foreigners, tourism, and like regional integration. How much trade do you have with your neighbors and that sort of thing. So this is the specific definitions. And where this becomes to be interesting to me is that it moves from working on peace in general to, well, what part of peace do you want to work on? Let's pick high levels of human capital. How do you make the individuals in the society as highly productive and highly effective as possible? And they're saying, well, work on youth engagement. Make sure the kids are getting to school, getting educated, staying healthy. Is there an innovation in the society? Do you have people that are actually inventing things and increasing your economic capability based on their education and their ability, the structures and the businesses that they want to do? And another interesting one was life expectancy. Is your medical systems performing to the point to where you're actually, people will live a long time, you know? And so you can start to get an imagination where I can, well, let's target youth engagement in this part of the world because we know there's an issue there. Okay. Let me go on and move on. This is a counterpoint. So I mentioned earlier that USI had a positive peace index rank of 26, but there's some degradation. So if you follow this red graph, this is the actual measure. Up is bad. So it's been declining. Positive peace score for the United States has been declining gradually. There are a couple of institutions and structures that have been improving, holding it down. But if you look at the attitudes graph, the things that they categorize as attitudinal issues, it's grown by 30, 40%, or should I say negatively been impacted, up is bad, by 30% over the last couple of years. Okay? And the specific information that pulled out in the reports was, here are the issues that the United States is facing when it comes to positive peace. Quality of information from media and authorities, factionalized elites, group grievances, freedom of the press, distribution of resources, and political democracy. And, you know, I see this list. I just went through 2020 and the election, and it's like, oh my gosh, is this ever evident? And so I believe their analysis. I believe their numbers. Maybe it's not exactly accurate, but these are real issues that could be worked on. So that's kind of a summary of the information on a positive peace index. We talked about the components of it. We talked about some of the impacts of having a high level of positive peace, and we shared some specific country information. Any questions or comments on this? There's a lot of material to noodle on here. Up, Casey Lee, you raised your hand.
Hi, yeah. I don't know if you can answer this, but do you know how they found out the criteria for the positive peace indicators and the negative peace indicators as well, like the 8 indicators for positive peace and the 23 for the negative?
So I don't know the specific decision-making process for what to include and what not to include. When you get into the materials and start looking at them, they talk to you about the methodology, which is more describing what I shared with you as opposed to the logic behind the methodology. And so there's some values that are built into that, right? The people that built the model put their personal values and what they think and how the world ought to operate. And so that's built into it. And so I think there's more than 2-minute answer to that question, and I frankly don't understand behind it how they built it and why they built it the way they did. But what I was really pleased about was they built it, and it's got some measures, and you can start to do something with it, and you can start to make a project and see if something else, see if you can make a change, right? So, okay, let me look at chat. Somebody was in there. Okay, nothing for me yet, no question. So let's move on to the final segment, which is basically, let's apply this to Rotary. We got another couple, just a few slides, and then we'll stop. And I have a poll for us. It'd be great to get your feedback on it. Okay, so I shared this material from the Institute for Economics and Peace. They've had 6 offices all across the globe. They've spent years and years developing these reports and these methodologies. So what? How does this connect to Rotary? What are you supposed to do with this? And if you go out to the Rotary website and study it, it's got a thing they call the Rotary causes, which are basically focus areas that Rotary International is trying to organize our activities around. These are the 6 that are identified: growing local economies, fighting disease, supporting education, saving mothers and children, providing clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. And I hope these are reasonably recognizable to the people in the room. Okay, promoting peace is one of those 6, and it actually has been, I'll describe it, but I'll preview it, that it's kind of been set up as an overarching area of focus. So let me get into that a little bit. We know that the activities that we do in these very familiar areas, fighting disease and supporting education, mothers and children, and clean water, these are life-saving projects that Rotary takes advantage of. But how do they map into, do they connect well with this pillars of positive peace? And how does that all fit together? And what I've done on my own, and it's not going to be 100% correct because this is a system and everything's connected more than you'd like to admit. But growing local economies and providing clean water, sanitation, and hygiene is clearly aligned in my mind with equitable distribution of resources. And when you go out there and provide water for a community in Africa that hasn't had water and they walk 5-10 miles a day to get it, that's a life-changing event for them. They can start spending time taking care of their family and taking care of their health and taking care of the growing crops and all sorts of stuff if they've got water. And if they don't have that, it's a problem. Same thing, fighting disease, supporting education, and saving mothers and children. Clearly, in my mind, best connected to high levels of human capital. How do we go out there and improve the quality of life of individuals across the world? And that begs a question. So what about this other stuff? What about free flow of information? What about good relationships with neighbors, well-functioning government? If you're in Rotary and you're working on these projects in these areas, they're good. They are fit well into building positive peace by impacting this. But who's working on this other stuff? Okay, so there's some very interesting next discussions that can be had on how do you choose to work on some of these other peace-specific topics, and how does it fit in your priorities and your spend, and how much time do you have, and where are you going to do the work, and that sort of thing. So we've come to the end of the presentation. I want to appreciate your time. Just repeated the summary here. Peace can be created. Peace impacts are game-changing and life-saving. Let's stop for a couple questions, and then I'll do a poll at the end. And it's a simple one. It's just trying to give me some feedback on what you thought about the material. Any questions coming up? Bradley?
Following up on your last slide, you're absolutely right with some of the projects that we already engage in our clubs accomplishes peace when we might not even realize it. But I also, recognizing the pandemic, understand some of our opportunities have been nixed in some way or another, and we haven't been able to engage in them. And in that sense, also that avenue of achieving peace has also been somewhat limited. Do you have any recommendations of ways, perhaps as any kind of service project recommendations that we as clubs could begin, if we're interested in it, as a direct peace related activity that we could begin doing? Are there certain forums or websites or activities that are done online where we're able to engage in that when COVID-19 prevents a lot of our clubs from meeting in person to accomplish service projects?
That's a big topic. That's a big question. And well, let me give you an example. You know, one of the strategic organizations that are connected with Rotary is Peace Corps. You know, they've had a partnership for a long time, and the Peace Corps shut down. I mean, when COVID started, they withdrew, as I understand, they withdrew 100% of their Peace Corps members and brought them home. And so that's down and out. So can't do much about the Peace Corps, but let's talk about one you can do. Another activity that Rotary supports is they find 180 people, if I'm not mistaken, every year to become Peace Fellows. And they go off and get a master's degree in peace studies. There's a shorter technical certificate that goes along with that program. And so if your organization's interested in supporting it, how do you garner the money to put it into that program? Okay. There's also the Rotarian Action Group for Peace. They're trying to get their legs on straight and figure out how to move faster than they are. And they could use some support, financial support. So those are a couple of easy and trivial ways. And I don't have a good map of projects that could be done, especially like right now, you say, hey, we want to, I mean, we're struggling to keep the medical stuff like the dentist work that goes on in Baja, right? How do you make sure that that's effective in this time? And so some of those things are continuing, even though it's harder to do things. But I would recommend that if you're interested in this topic and your clubs are interested in this topic, it's a good time to do planning and understanding and research and learn more about it, because you saw how many factors there were. 23 factors for negative peace and another 23 times 8, 24 factors for positive peace. And trying to figure out which one of those and how to work on it is a difficult task. And that's what I'm in with my club right now, is trying to figure out how to point them in the direction of saying, are you interested in this? And would you really divert money? And what I've got in my mind is I'm trying to come up with an idea that's so good that I can have them redirect 50% of our donation budget. Right? I don't think they're going to do that, but because we're busy with a lot of things. But that's kind of my mind, is how do you get organized around this? How do you make a compelling case for it? And how do you get people's energy centered to a point where you can actually get something done? So that's how I'd answer that question, Bradley. Anything else? Okay, let's let me see if I can find my poll here. Poll right here. Okay, so I launched the polling. I'm trying to make sure I'm talking to my co-pilot here. I'm going to stop the share. How about that? Launch polling. Okay, I'll go in and read it. This poll is anonymous, so we're not interested in contact information at this time, so don't worry about that part. Okay. And the question behind the poll is, did we succeed in building a case for peace can be built and peace impacts are game-changing and life-saving? So it's multiple choice. You can answer more than one. I've got it organized to where when we get enough responses, I'll be able to get a reasonably clear signal on interest level. Like, should we continue it or not? If you remember, I'm doing this presentation for part of my IEP Ambassador program. This is the material I've got here is going to help me get the certificate. I'm going to take the same material to the club, Rancho Bernardo Sunrise in January, and I get a read off of their interest levels. And if it comes out to this is really good material, let's continue with it. That's one answer. And if it says, if everybody answers this was a waste of my time, then it's like, okay, well, that's a different message. So we've got 84% of the people voting, 92%. I'm not going to vote. I don't think I can vote. We got 100%. Let's share the results. Okay, can you see that? I mean, I can see it. Okay, so number one answers. I'd like to learn more. Yes was a good answer too. Very few no's. I'm lost. That's good. That's good. Nobody was lost. How can our club get involved? This is too complicated. Zero, this is a waste of my time. So this is fantastic results. I really, really, really appreciate your feedback. This is exactly what I wanted to hear. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go talk to myself about why I'm spending a year working on this stuff, you know? So this is great. Thank you so much for your time. Now, as far as forward-looking stuff goes, we're connected to Bradley and Jesse, and Michael, you're here. Let's figure out what the next steps are. You know, it's if everybody's raising their hand, says I'd like to hear more about this. You know, fantastic. I'd be more than happy to share this material anytime, anywhere, actually online, probably, and we'll just see how it goes here. Michael, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to, good job, James. I think this is, it is a complicated topic when you start getting down into the elements of positive peace and everything else. And then all of a sudden a light bulb goes off and say, oh, wait a minute. All that stuff is interrelated. And that's one of the common things between the positive peace and the Rotary's areas of focus. By the way, they have just added the 7th, that the environmental stability or such sustainability. So there is a 7th now. But the point here, at the end of the day, the answer to all the questions is everything that Rotary does contributes to positive peace. And you know, that's the short answer. Take every single thing that's going on with Rotary and all we do in all the areas of focus and add the 4-way test to it, which is the way we behave. And it all relates to those elements of positive peace, which is why the peace centers make so much sense for Rotary, because they are all using positive peace as part of their academic construct. So there becomes all these connections. And if you look at the global grants and what grants can we do and organize projects and such, every one of the global grants requires a community needs assessment and such. The community needs assessment relates to those things in the community that are needed to build the community that are all those things relating to positive peace. Yeah, so nice. It all keeps coming together. And as you know, I've been working in this field for some time, and it's just amazing. Every time you discover something new, you start seeing that's another connection. So, it's a wonderful partnership, and I love the fact of the way you put it together and are starting to do it. We're going to be spending a lot of time together.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Bradley and Jesse, for helping me connect to people. Let's stay in contact. Everybody have a very happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and a very happy New Year, and wishes that, 2021 is not the same as 2020. What a mess.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, James. Thank you for the presentation. Another thing that came to my mind, everybody, as we were thinking about ways for peace, of course, we have peace committees and peace chairs, as mentioned by Mike, as he's in charge of peace within the whole entire district. And Allison is a representative from PB Rotaract's peace chair and peace committee. We also have one in City Heights Rotaract. If you're looking for ways to do peace or do some kind of good and service to continue that positive peace, and your club is trying to find those methods during this time, look into peace committees or look into ways that you can use peace as a way to accomplish service in the world. It's as we felt and as we've seen, it is something that can make a huge difference in ways that we don't understand. James, I'm so grateful for you coming and joining us, also to Jay and to Mike as well, and to all of you all who joined and attended of the Rotarians and Rotaractors. Thank you all very, very much. Feel free to head off if you need to. feel free to reach out to one another. As James said, a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, a Happy New Year, and for 2021, we'll continue the Rotary year as business as usual, reaching out to one another and finding ways to make it through the troubles that we might be going through with 2021 and COVID-19, and we'll be able to do it. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.